Welcome back to another edition of the Wasim Muhammad Show, where you'll hear the lively art of conversation as it relates to our community here in the city of Camden, the county, and region. And it is always an honor to be here to represent the Advisory Board of Education, starting with our Advisory Board President, Mrs. Catherine Blackshear, and our Vice President, Mrs. Martha Wilson. And I also would like to thank the wonderful mayor of this city, Mayor Dana L. Red, for allowing this opportunity, as well as the superintendent of Camden City Schools, Mr. Payman Rohanaford. On behalf of all of them, we thank them, and we are definitely honored and privileged to be here with you. But today, I am very excited because I have with me in the studio here to interview a man whom I think when you see this gentleman, you'll understand why he's being here interviewed and why we're archiving this history here in Camden of this wonderful person, Mr. Ben White, former educator and gentleman. Yes,
Thank you, brother.
it's always good. Thanks a lot, Mr. White. I feel kind of out of place calling you by your first name because not only have you been a long-term resident and gentleman from the city of Camden, but as well as you've been an educator. You've been you was an educator when I was in school. You was an educator when I also was an educator with you as well. Right. And this is an honor and a privilege to have you here. But for those who may not know, please tell them know who Mr. Ben White is.
Wow. I'm a Camden resident, born and raised in the Parkside side of Camden. The White family lived on Langham Avenue. I lived on Wildwood Avenue. I lived on Lewis Street. I lived on Park Boulevard. So all around, I was educated at Parkside School, elementary, and then Hatch Middle School, as it was called back in the day. Went to Camden High for 1 year, and then we moved to Cherry Hill. So the city is in me. I know the streets, I know the family names, I know the people. I mean, your family. I know all of your brothers and sisters and your mom very well.
Yes,
when they went through Hatch. Then I came back after college. And I taught, my first year was at Pine Point.
And where did you go to school at?
I went to Rutgers in New Brunswick.
Rutgers,
Livingston College,
okay.
yes.
Okay. Rutgers alumni.
Yeah,
yes.
That's correct. Yes.
Yes.
And then from there, I went to Hatch Middle School. And that's where I spent 37 years. So 38 years teaching, 1 year at Pine Point. And then they did a transfer because they needed a teacher at Hatch. And I was glad to be back at Hatch because my parents went to Hatch. Mm-hmm. And I went to Hatch. I was able to continue that lineage.
Now, do you think, did you major in education when you was at college?
What? I didn't.
No.
I did psychology, yes.
Oh, okay.
Psychology and journalism were my major focus, but I finished my major early. So I picked up educational courses. So I graduated with 2 degrees, a degree in psychology and a degree in education.
And this was during the 60s or 70s. I'm trying to be proper.
Yeah, you're really nice.
Not tell your age.
No, this was 73, 1973.
Yes,
I'm not ashamed of it, 1973. And my plan was just to teach for 1 or 2 years, get some money under my belt, and go back to grad school, because having a basic degree in psychology is not enough. You got to have that master's degree. And I fell in love with it. Fell in love with education, fell in love with the children, working with them, and just stayed and was quite happy with that.
And what do you think was the striking thing that made you fall more in love? Do you think it was the urge to teach and deal with people in mind since you was a psychology major, or do you think it was the giving back to the community in which you grew up with?
In the 70s, it was mainly the giving back.
Yes, sir.
However, that psychology degree came into play every day.
Yes, sir.
Because of the child's psyche is so complicated, especially our children. There's so many things happening in their lives. You have to kind of sift through to find the good and help them see the good in themselves. But definitely giving back. I love teaching. I love the children. We would do, trips, special programs, breakfast club in the morning, and things like that. So it was totally giving back to the community.
We're going to get in a lot of that because, I had the honor and the privilege, as you stated earlier, I'm the youngest of our 5 siblings of our family. So I had the honor of watching my siblings as they went through Parkside and Hatch Middle School when you were there. and you were well known to me even before I went to Hatch, and because of the extra activities that you did with the students there at Hatch. I mean, just to name one of them, dance club, and that's a segment we're going to get into, because I know when you see so many wonderful people whom came through your through your club, the dance club that you had. I know it makes you feel proud. And we're going to talk about a lot of those wonderful people. I want to get back a little more about Mr. Ben White, his educational background and working at Hatch. And now, who was the principal? Was it Mr. Milton still there
That
as
is
the
correct.
principal?
Mr.
Wow.
Milton was my first principal. Yeah,
Yes,
Kenneth
sir.
Milton.
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah, and he
Yes,
set a
sir.
good environment for the teachers at Hatch.
Yes, sir.
We would have bowling parties. We would hang out sometime after work. So the teachers became, it was the Hatch family. Even
Correct.
before the whole idea of a family school
Correct.
started.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Hatch had an environment of a family. We would do things together outside of Hatch, which made teaching in that environment even easier, because you knew the teacher. They weren't like coming in and then leaving at 3. No, they were coming in and they would stay overtime, and then afterwards you would still hang out with them too. So you got to know the people. It wasn't just as they say, a 9 to 5 type of job.
Correct.
No, it was deeper than that.
Now, do you think that during that time of the 70s, do you think that that time was because of America, particularly Black America, was a little more socially conscious? And do you think that played a part in,
Definitely.
the difference in attitudes of children, and even you talking about giving back, that being conscious? And I mean, because the music was conscious, the culture was conscious.
That's right.
It was like a regeneration of the Black Renaissance.
Yes,
You know?
it really was. You're right. You hit that nail right on the head. You think of Public Enemy's music that was out then and everything.
Yeah.
It was all about giving back, and that's where we came from. The whole Black Power and all that. So yeah. Plus, Camden was going through a shift, because when I went to school at Hatch, there were only a handful of African Americans, only a handful of Blacks. It was mainly Polish and Jewish children in my classes, and you got friendly with them. So Camden was going through that change too, and through ethnic races.
Correct.
So when you came back, it was like, yeah, these are our people. We've got to get back. We have to do the right thing, as they say.
Oh, okay.
There were a couple times when I got asked, because I lived in Cherry Hill, where I was approached to come and teach and transfer and teach at Cherry Hill West. And I was like, no, I'm happy where I am. Camden is my legacy, and Hatch really is my home.
Correct.
So I was good with that.
Yeah. Now, do you think that you talked about growing up in Camden, and particularly in Parkside section of Camden, which was a diverse neighborhood. Well, I wouldn't even say diverse, but with very little African American people living in Parkside section of Camden. Because I know my family moved there in 1967, and they said that they were one of the first families that was on Park Boulevard, next to the football field.
Plus, you had a big house.
Yes, and do you think that socially, we're going to stay in the past for a minute before we go on, talk about some striking things, because we have a whole hour together to talk to you about this thing here. But do you think that, because I talked to some older people who were in Camden when Camden was more of a diverse community, and they said that some people think that the reason why Camden was that generation was so effective in giving back and effective in accomplishments is to a certain degree was because it was diverse, because they were already cultured and growing up in Camden with being around a diverse neighborhood, diverse ideas, diverse people. So putting in different ideas and coming in different. Do you think that attributed to that, growing up in Parkside when it was a diverse neighborhood? Do you think that meant something? And going to school with, I guess busing was popular then, but even with going to school with diverse, ethnic groups, did that help out in your global approach to the world?
I think it did. Being young, you didn't realize it. I just knew that Tommy Dyer was the boy across the street that I played with. I didn't realize or focus in that much that he was white, But you coming in later on, yeah, it did. Plus, during that time, families had a different focus too. Dr. Martin Luther King's message and everybody else's message was, we are just as good. And everybody worked hard.
Correct.
I came from a family where everybody worked. Grandma worked, dad worked, mom worked. Grandma was a domestic. Dad started his own dry cleaning business.
Correct.
Mom was
right
the
there on
first.
Haddon Avenue.
Yes, correct.
Legendary White's Cleaner. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Mom was a telephone operator. She was the first black telephone operator with Bell Atlantic.
Okay.
And then she came over and worked at Camden Trust Bank on Broadway. So it was that kind of culture. You were trying to build yourself up. You were trying to build your family up. You were trying to, I'm not going to say you were trying to build your wealth up, but you were just trying to capture that American dream.
Correct.
And that was the main focus.
Well, I think that you know, that time span, and I always say this to my friends. We all say this, that we feel so fortunate to come through that era of American history, particularly black history in the black community, because it was a different community. And as you said, that you were, you know, y'all were focused was trying to achieve, you know, that y'all was just as better, and y'all was focused, and y'all had purpose and aim. And we're going to talk about some of those things that helped to shape you in the cultural environment that makes you who and what you are when we come back and we wind down on this segment. And as we wind down on this segment, we're going to come back and we're talking to Mr. Ben White, legendary educator here in the city of Camden at Hatch Middle School for years, who I had the wonderful opportunity not only to be a student at Hatch Middle School, but also to be an educator and work with him as an educator for the Camden City Schools then. And it was such a wonderful privilege and honor to work with that team. And he talked about family. We're going to get more in talking about that when we come back. But thank you, and we're going to come back and talk about some more things.
Okay.
All right, you got it.
Hey Joe, what's wrong? Oh, wait a minute. Did you forget to register for the Selective Service system? Joe, you knew you had to register within 30 days of your 18th birthday. Joe, I'm disappointed. You know that there are serious legal penalties for not registering, and you can be barred from college loans and grants, vocational training programs, and many government jobs for the rest of your life. Well, there is an answer. Go register now. Yes, now. Technically, you're in violation of the law, but if you register as soon as you can, there will be no penalty. If you don't register before your 26th birthday, however, that's it. You'll be paying for that bad decision for the rest of your life. Don't let a dumb mistake ruin your life. Register for the Selective Service, even if you've missed the deadline. Go register at www.sss.gov or your local post office.
So many kids' activities today seem to leave out the activity part. New research tells us that just getting children to walk an extra 35 minutes a day could spare them the pain of thinning bones later in life. Encourage your kids to get up, get out, and get moving.
Hello.
Hey, Grandma, how about another grape soda?
A public service message on building strong bones for kids from the Pediatric Orthopedic Society of North America and the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons.
We are back with legendary educator and retired Camden City School teacher, Mr. Ben White, from a wonderful family here in Camden. You talked earlier too about White's Cleaner on Haddon Avenue, which is an icon business because obviously you had to be one of the first black-owned businesses on Haddon Avenue at the time. And you want to talk a little bit about that?
My father and my uncle and his brother, his older brother David, started White's Cleaning Service, and it had several locations. It first started in Van Hook Street, out of my Aunt Peach and Uncle Dave's house. And then Uncle Dave had his truck, Dad had his truck, and they would go out and collect the clothes and bring them back to that location. So that's when the dry cleaner actually came to your house. I think that was one of the first jobs I ever had that I hated. Friday night, I had to sit in the back of the van, and as clothes got thrown back, I had to go through the pockets to make sure that nothing was left in the pocket, because if a tissue or something was left, it would shred in the dry cleaner.
Correct, yeah.
So yeah, I touched many a nasty tissue. You know.
Very interesting.
Right, yeah. But then they graduated to the store on Haddon Avenue. And as that became a profitable business, they ventured out and tried to do another one in Woodbury. But that area wasn't as receptive, so after a couple of years, they closed that down and stayed focused with the one store that they had on Haddon Avenue. And yeah, a lot of people have gone through there. We were very honored when Mayor at that time, Gwendolyn Faison, gave accommodation to Dad and Uncle Dave for their business being there so long when they retired.
Yeah.
So that was very nice.
That's great. And
Yeah.
there you go. We have that little history that we have in Camden. That's why it's so important that we must preserve our history and tell our story.
True.
But nevertheless, I said earlier before we took the break from that last segment that we would get into talking about the culture and refinement part of education. And I think, you know, coming from the background that I come from, that culture and refinement really is, to me, is a part of the educational process of a child, of an adult for that case. But and when you have good manners and you have good education, it delves to have great culture and refinement. And we like to say that in Camden, at least on this side of Camden at Hatch Middle School, those of us who came through that we knew that if you wanted culture and refinement, that you had to go by Mr. Ben White. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
The way I'm dressed today pretty much is the way I dressed back then, except no bow tie, long tie.
Yes,
I believed in dressing up when you came to work each day. Some people were comfortable with khakis or something like that. I like to do the dress clothes because my mentor was Dr. Roy Dawson.
Okay, yes,
When
sir.
I went to Hatch, Dr. Dawson was one of my teachers.
Okay.
And I was doing math, and I'd look at him, he'd always be in a suit jacket or a sport coat, always sharp. And I was like, yeah. Now, I had no idea back then I was going to be an educator,
Yes, sir.
you know. But I was like, that's the look I want. And then lo and behold, it happened to come out that way, that I became an educator. And I said, you know what? I'm going to dress every day when I go in. So that was one part. The other part was when we started the Miss Hatch pageant.
Correct.
It was actually started by two other people, not myself. But as time went on, they transferred to another school or they left, and I took it over. And I started to tweak it to some ways that I felt it needed to be tweaked. And we taught personal hygiene. We took the girls to the mall so they could learn about makeup. We did that at Fashion Fair.
And that was big deal at Hatch Middle School, was that Hatch pageant of those young ladies who was going to, you know, at least try out and get an opportunity to express their talent, and there's so many different things. And I think that just keep on, proceed.
I am so proud of my girls. I was at Grand Lux Restaurant just 2 days ago. And ran into Denise Muse.
Okay, correct, yes.
And her dad. And they were sitting at the table next to me. And we were laughing and talking about the Miss Hatch pageant. Now, she's a grown woman. She has a daughter who's grown now. And that memory still lingers, so that warms my heart. Where was I? Probably Cherry Hill Mall again, and ran into Mary Jean Lindsay and a couple other the former girls, Dance Club and Miss Hatch and all that. So I'm really proud of the memories we instilled at people at Hatch. And man, like I said, manners was part of Miss Hatch.
Correct.
For the young men in the classroom, we took them on trips. We took them to see Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater.
Correct.
You know,
The
we took
Wiz.
them to the Wiz, yeah. Took them to
Yes,
plays in Philly, and then we brought those plays into our own school and put the productions on. We did.
So what got you into the arts?
My mother, my mother. My father didn't like musicals. My father could sit through a drama, but he could never sit through a musical. So when I was about 7 or 8, Mom would always take me to be her escort whenever we went to a musical or a play. And my mother was heavy into the arts because when she was younger, she performed in a couple shows. I never knew it, but when I was going through some old articles, there she was. So it came naturally. I got to see, back in those days, we had the Camden County Music Fair. It was a big tent that was set up in Cherry Hill, and you would go there to see all these Broadway shows that actually came to Cherry Hill. So that's when I got to get the knowledge of the Broadway theater and watch the dance steps. And that's when I started learning choreography and things like that. So that's how I got my culture from Mom, and then just naturally passed it on. Just like the Miss Hatch pageant. I never realized it, but my mother had a group of friends called the Valkyries. And the Valkyries were located in Camden, and they would take young ladies and introduce them to society like a cotillion. And it was called the Snowball.
Correct.
And it was given, I think, January 1st every year. And this was a big thing. Camden girls,
Correct.
dressed, gowns down to the knee, being presented into society, men in tuxedos. And my mother's organization, they got the girls in, they make sure they had their dresses and everything.
Well, you mentioned cotillion. I mean,
Yes.
we have to mention that this year that the mayor youth forum that she has, Mayor Dana Red, that you did the entertainment for the young ladies and young men for the cotillion there that she has annually every year. And that's a great event. And I urge everybody to, to find out more about that and what you can do to help out with young people who's continuing the legacy that you started many, many years ago. But you were talking about that cotillion.
Right, that was an excellent affair. It was my first time working with them, a very nice group of young people. And held at the aquarium, which is a beautiful location.
Correct.
Very nice. And the young people work hard. They do more than just the dance part that they do with me. They were writing poetry with another young lady. They were doing interviews.
Correct,
they had papers.
Work with
they had
Sister
to write.
Nora and,
yes.
And Dory as well too. Who's go back to Hatch? Did you teach Dory and Nelson at Hatch?
Wait a minute, let me think. I think I did, yes.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. Listen,
He's
it's got a lot of
Parkside.
people, right? A lot of people have
So
gone
put you on
through.
the
I got
spot
to
on
go
the air.
back.
I'm
Yes.
just sure you remember people, but you're better with faces. I do understand. I know if I struggle with being a former educator, I know you have a tough time with trying to remember names and faces and different people and people that you impacted. Because not only your impact was not only at Hatch Middle School, but your impact was across the city. And I remember talking to girls then we were younger. They all, they either talked about Hatch basketball team or Hatch dance club, and so many people wanted to go or transfer their children to Hatch, especially those who lived in that area and who maybe moved out, and they knew the value of the dance club. And I tell the stories to my son sometime, who you had in the cotillion, Hafiz, and my daughter Hasiba as well too. And I tell them sometimes how Mr. White, would chase us out of the dance club because we would be in basketball practice.
Yes.
And you come with that same stick and chase us up out of there and get us out of there.
That's because my girls could not focus with you tall, slim, handsome guys in there, and I'm trying to get them to get these dance steps, especially when we're going on tour, because we would tour around to all the other schools. And we, like you said, we had a reputation, so it had to be perfect.
Yes.
The basketball playing, they'd be like, Mr. White, they're in here again, they're in here.
And you chase us out. But so you're saying that, so you were self-taught in the dances, or did you go to school, or did you take up training? Okay.
But in the beginning, I was self-taught.
Okay.
And later on, I went to, every weekend, I would go to New York, and I would take classes at the Alvin Ailey American School of Dance, and then I would take classes at Clark Center with a jazz master named Pepsi Bethel, who came from the islands, still owned a parrot and the whole thing. And that's when I honed my skills. And then as I got older, a couple students wanted to go. So I got permission from their parents, and I took Corbett McNeil, who went on to become a head dancer at Philadelphia, Delia Echeverria, who was a phenomenal dancer. And her family was from, they went to school in Parkside, but they lived on the east side of Camden. And Robert Judge, and his father, Mr. Judge, used to be, I want to say, downtown. I think it was in the custodian services.
Okay, Mr. Judge, correct,
mistaken.
for sure.
Yes.
Mr. Judge, you're
and
correct,
his,
yes,
and
sir.
his son. They were three phenomenal dancers, and every Saturday we'd get in my car, go to New York, take classes at Ailey, and then come on back down.
Wow.
So it was nice. It was nice that I was getting the gift, and then I could share it with some other students.
Well, you talked about Allen Elvey for this new generation, and we hope to get a lot of young people to try to listen and tune into the Wasim Muhammad show. You just let the people know who Alvin Ailey is. I mean, that's you talk about Black history.
Yeah, really,
really. We have to pay homage to the master.
Alvin Ailey grew up in Texas on a rural farm, became a really great dancer. His famous dance partner was Carmen de Lavila, who married Jeffrey Holder, and Jeffrey Holder is famous for back in the day where the commercial says, "This is a cola nut, and this is an uncola nut."
Yes, sir, yeah.
Right, real tall man. If you watch
Correct.
James Bond movies, he was in, I think, Live and Let Die.
Correct.
And it was set in Jamaica and everything like that. So, yeah, Alvin Ailey became famous like that. Notorious for wearing penny loafers and walking on the back of them. He was just an easy kind of guy. But he started a modern dance company that is now the dance ambassadors for the world, the Alvin Ailey American Company. They travel all parts of the world. Out of 56 weeks in a year, they may travel 42 weeks of the year. Yes.
How important, and I don't know, I think we may be running down time on this segment, but when we come back, I would like to talk about how important you think that culture and the dance and the arts and entertainment, how important is that, do you think, to develop in the whole child? We want to get your idea on that, because we always got to tie into the minds of our former educators who did it right, who we know did things right, so we can teach and model and give that modeling to some of the new educators that's today. So we're going to come back and talk a little more with Mr. Ben White, former educator here in the city of Camden. We're going to talk about the importance of arts and entertainment and culture and refinement when it comes to making the whole child. We'll be right back.
We had been called up for the first time. Wildfires were getting close to homes. At that moment, I got my first taste of just how important the Guard is.
Be there for your community at NationalGuard.com.
Savings Man here with a story for you about two young spenders named Tommy and Sue. Their parents let them buy whatever they chose, like video games and designer clothes. As they grew older, they spent all their pay on fancy cars, houses, 2 lattes a day. They lived in the moment, never saving a dime. When they tried to retire, they'd run out of time. Working forever is Tom and Sue's fate, so choose to save now before it's too late. Visit our website to find out more, 'cause a happy ending's worth saving for.
And we are back, and we're talking to Mr. Ben White, former educator here in the city of Camden. And we before we went away, we were talking about the arts and entertainment, the culture and refinement to making the whole child. And you know, we have our issues, unfortunately, here in urban centers in America. We have issues with our children. And always there's the question, how do we inspire young children to learn? Because I know generations are different. And you know, this generation has a lot of distractions, and more distractions than we've had when we were coming up. And but nevertheless, what importance, what role do you think that culture, arts, and entertainment play into making the whole child when it comes to the educational process?
When you say whole, that's the key word right there. A child that has never been to the theater other than a movie, a child who's never seen a dance performance, for that matter, a child who's never left the city can really never be whole. If we look back to the ancient Greeks, to ancient civilization, ancient Africa, theater was always a big part of the culture. You get to see other people's ideas, and you get to talk about those ideas. When you run into somebody and they can't have a conversation past A and B, it's because their world hasn't opened up to be exposed to all these ideas. And we always felt at Hatch that education went beyond the textbook. And I think that's one of the issues now. A lot of times we're teaching for the test instead of teaching for the world. When we took young people to New York to see a play, we even in the summertime took a group of young people to New York to audition. Bill Cosby was holding open auditions, and we prepared a group of young people to go up. My partner, Yvonne Kersey, who was also a music teacher at Hatch.
Correct, yes indeed.
She was very big on that, because Yvonne was able to go to New York and take the place of Nell Carter, who was in Give Me a Break. But she took the place of Nell Carter in the musical Ain't Misbehavin'.
Yes.
And then once the musical closed, she came back to Hatch to teach. So she brought a great wealth of knowledge with her when she came back. I've always been a theater buff and a dance buff. So if any play was coming to Philly, or if any dance company was coming to Philly, I made sure, whether it was a big group or a small group, I was able to do the trip. Back in the day when the education didn't pay for a whole trip, parents would put up part of the money, and then we would get the other half of the money.
Correct.
Then later, as the Board of Education paid for all trips, we were able to get that because other people downtown saw our vision, that our students needed more than just a textbook. When I first started coming to Hatch, we were taking young people to Disney World. You know, we would take flights to Disney World for 3 or 4 days, staying in the hotel. And that was like a mini world vacation because Disney had Epcot Center.
Correct.
So the kids would see London, they would see
Yes,
Paris, you know, they would see
They
Africa.
travel around in their mind.
Right.
Correct.
All in that one thing. That's a big thing. Now, true, they have Facebook and they got YouTube now, you know, so they get
World
to see
Wide
these
Web,
things,
yeah.
yes. But to see it live and in person
Correct.
is a whole different thing. I can't begin to tell you how many times I run into people and they say, I remember that show that you took me to, or,
Correct,
you know,
yeah.
I'm still dancing.
Well, you know, I
Yes.
kind of remember, and I think we were in the 3rd grade at Parkside. It was like an annual thing at Parkside Elementary School where we had, during Christmas time, and they would bring the children up,
That's right.
2nd graders or 3rd grade. I can't remember what grade we were, but we was all proud and excited because I had older brothers and sisters who were at Hatch, being the youngest of 5. And it was very excited that we was going to spend the day up at Hatch Middle School with older people. You talk a little more about what that was about. What was the purpose of
We
that?
always
Because it
did
seemed like y'all was working in conjunction with other schools.
We were.
Just to educate the whole child. I think that is so very important.
We did a lot. We collected gifts to give to
Correct.
the children. Then we put on a full, pretty much a 2-hour show, hour and a half, because 3rd grade is your attention span. But we incorporated with spoken word, acting pieces, vocal, and dance. And dance club had their costumes, and they would come down the aisle dancing. Back in those days, I can't remember what song it was, but full routines, and they would quickly go change. And we made sure that the costumes were elaborate. And we even got some of the students to come up on stage and learn some of the dances with us. That was always part of our mission, that the audience just wasn't stationary.
Correct.
We danced in the audience, and sometimes we brought people up. But it was part of the giving back. It really was. That was our whole thing. And we each day, I think it went for like 3 days. One part of Camden would come in, then another part of Camden with the school district would come in, and then on the 3rd day would be our home schools in our area, Parkside, Forest Hill. I think there was maybe 1 or 2 other schools in
Whittier,
that
I
area.
believe it was,
Probably
yeah.
Whittier.
Correct, yeah.
And they would come in. But yeah, it was giving back, because we
Yeah.
were part of that generation of giving back.
Yeah, that's important, and I think so. We can't echo that part enough, and you know, because you find so many people, and it's unfortunate, you know, with the social environment in Camden, that so many people left this area and they didn't come back to give back. And I'm not angry at them, because many of those of us who stayed should have stepped up to play a little more, because I'm with self-determination. You know, we're not going to blame others. We're not going to even throw that idea out there, because you make people sick with that kind of mentality. But let's talk about some of the plays you put on. And I just remember, and I went to a couple of Broadway plays myself too, and over in Philadelphia would travel over there. I think some of the plays that you used to put on with the students at Hatch was remarkable. I mean, I think about Robin Carney, you know, people who were just phenomenal, you know, actress and great voice. And I believe I was at a funeral one time, and I heard her singing there. I said, yeah, she's doing what she was born to do, you know, because she was doing that thing back in elementary school. And I remember y'all put on The Wiz and different plays like that with the students that actually could almost, you can take it and travel. And I think you did take them around and travel with that.
Yeah, we did. I think The Wiz is our most popular, because we did it like 2 times. And then I went over to Camden High and helped them with their production when they did it. But we didn't realize how great the talent was in Camden.
Yes, sir.
Until we did the Wiz. We had Joel Adams.
Correct.
Who is a minister
Was,
now.
correct.
Robin
Yes,
Carney Victor, who you mentioned, who could sing her behind off.
Correct.
Andrea. Trying to remember Andrea's last name.
Correct.
Andrea. I mean, we just had so many. Russell Webb, his family, the Webb family was in it. It was just one of those projects.
Correct.
That it spoke to everybody, and the singing, the dancing, the acting. To see young people, you forgot they were young.
Correct.
You forgot they were middle school students.
Correct. I mean, that was such a great era. And Camden, period, where there was so many great people. Not only was Coach Clarence Turner with the Turners Burners, Camden basketball doing this thing, but just aesthetically and culturally, you know, Camden was the place to be. And, you know, it was wonderful, wonderful times. I know I talked to Reverend Chris Collins, and he always mentioned, he was a great friend of mine and a great gentleman, a great brother in the community of Camden with the Anointed News Journal. And he talks about how in meeting you impacted his life as he honored you one year at his annual Christmas for Chris that he has every year. You want to talk a little bit about the impact that you made on young people and how it makes you feel?
I think what you give out comes back to you. Chris and his I call him his play brother, Brian Lipscomb. We would always hang together. We loved video games. And we would go to the Cherry Hill, across the street from Cherry Hill Mall was this big video complex. And we would just, you know, play games for an hour or two, and we would get to talk and network. So we got to be that bond. It was more than just teacher or student, just like friends, guys hanging out. And after he went to the high school, and then when he left high school, we just kept that bond, and it was just a good friendship. I am the godfather to his firstborn son, Chris Jr., and I helped him. I was the best man at his wedding. So it was nice. It was very nice.
Do you still keep up with a lot of the ex-dancers that was in the dance club? And
thank goodness for Facebook.
Yes, that's how I reached out to you.
Yes, Facebook at Cherry Hill Mall.
Yes.
But I do, and that's a blessing. I got to go back to one point that I'd be remiss if I didn't mention James E. Mumford. Just like Dr. Dawson kind of influenced my dress, when I went to Hatch, James E. Mumford was the music director, and he put on fabulous productions. He did productions like The King and I, where he had guys coming down the aisle carrying the Queen and stuff. And that kind of left an impression in my mind. Plus, it gave Hatch a reputation of being a place to come to see plays. So when I came to Hatch, I was kind of like following Dr. Mumford's leads, because I think he left and went to Illinois or Indiana University. But that's where I kind of got that from, with the plays and things from him too. And of course, when you have the people like Yvonne Kersey helping you,
correct. Yeah.
You know, you really can't go wrong.
And
we were a dynamic duo.
I know that was a great, watching her be on Broadway, and I think the music. I remember we saw her in the commercials at the time. We was like, oh, that's Miss Courtesy. You know, somebody we knew, and it gave us inspiration as children to inspire. You know, and I think inspiration is, our people need information and inspiration.
That's correct.
And I think to inspire children to learn and to keep them grounded with athletics, whether it's athletics or culture, or whether it's martial arts, to keep them grounded in those type of things so they can do better in the classroom. You know, I think it's a good deterrent.
That discipline is something that you always keep, and it will carry through everything that you do. When I work with a group of young people, I can tell who's taking dance classes and who's into the arts, or maybe in military.
Correct.
You know, because of they listen, the attention. Dancers are always visual people. You can't say a step and they get it like that. They have to watch it, because I could say turn, and that could be interpreted 3 different ways. So you have to be more specific, and when you show. So as you said, you lead by example. If you just talk, that only gets to part of the brain. But if you talk and then show, that gets to even more of the brain. And so, yes.
Yeah, well, I think that's setting us up for what we want to talk about when we come back is about education in general, because in fact, not only were you a great dance teacher and not only great culture and refinement, you also was a great educator. I know I watch you, and even when I had the opportunity to be a teacher next to you at Hatch Middle School, you know, the effect that you had on the children and the discipline that you had in your class. And I think that's something we're going to come back and we're going to talk about with Mr. Ben White, the effect of education yesterday, today, and tomorrow, where we think it's going. So we'll be right back with Mr. Ben White.
And now, another adventure with Savings Man.
Oh dear, I can't afford that.
Charge it. You can pay it off later.
Not so fast, credit card guy.
Savings Man.
Don't let him entice you, ma'am. Credit card guy can lead you to big trouble. You need a savings plan.
You're right, Savings Man.
Get this ballpark estimate worksheet at choosetosave.org. It will help you get started.
Gee, thanks, Savings Man.
No, thank you.
So visit choosetosave.org and get your ballpark estimate today.
I realized at that moment, these people really needed us. And I was going to make a difference, right here in my community.
Be there for your community at NationalGuard.com.
I'm just still very excited by being here with a mentor of mine, educationally and culturally, here in the city of Camden, Mr. Ben White, and have come from a great family of men and women who did some wonderful things in Camden that modeled or coined the phrase of giving back to the community where you grew up from. When we left the last segment, we was talking a little more about education. Yes. And what do you think, you know, being an educator? I think you was an educator for how many years? That was
38.
38 years before you retired. Yeah. Wow, you know, you can't. We all, and you still have your faculties. I thought we drove you crazy.
No.
No.
That's kind of what kept me young.
Yes, sir. But what do you think? And I heard you mention earlier about, you know, that educators teach to the test instead of to the making the whole child and different things. What is it? It give you an opportunity right here on the Camden City Schools TV station to talk a little bit about education, things that something you might want to say that you can give that new educators and educators that's educating now can take with them that the 30 years of service that you gave to the Camden City School District.
I think I first want to start by saying that if you're an educator, you have to do and say and be consistent in what you do or say. Mm-hmm. Young people are quick to remember what you say and what you promise them. Yes, and if you don't deliver on that promise. Mm-hmm. So making false promises is something that you should never do. Mm-hmm. Being consistent. If you discipline this child on this situation and this other child does the same thing, discipline has to be equal. Mm-hmm. Children will immediately pick up if you're unfair. Mm-hmm. And I would like to think that that's something that I've been consistent on. Because once they know that you're fair, then they open up their minds. Mm-hmm. And then they will not shut you out, and they will let you in, and you can teach them anything. You can take them on that educational road because they won't have roadblocks of mistrust of you and that you are a liar, you know, that kind of thing.
Correct. Yeah.
I agree with being friendly with a young person, but not their friend, because then that puts a whole nother thing in too. That sets them up for falseness, because then when you do discipline them, they think, oh, you're not my friend anymore. You have to say, no, I am still your friend. We are friendly, but I am still your teacher, and I'm your teacher. I'm your teacher first.
And I think, you know, being a student at Hatch and watching you and remembering those times we were at Hatch, you know, you talked about that consistency. And we saw that, you know, although we said, oh, Mr. White, he's cool, you know, we wanted to see what you had on, you know, with the clothes, the stylish clothes you were wearing and what you was doing next with the arts and entertainment. But everybody had respect for you. Every, I mean, even what they would say, we would say the word hard. I don't know what this generation say now. I'm just now learning on fleek or something like that. You have some of the youngsters here in the studio. Right. But whatever word they use now, I mean, whether it was the athlete, whether it was the studious student, whether it was the student who was cool, because we had that generation of cool, you know.
That's correct.
But whether it was the student who was considered the tack heads or rough heads or roughnecks, whatever they call them, they all had respect for you. Why do you think that diverse of students, because I've never seen a student out, even not only as a student at Hatch, but even an educator. The 9 years that I was an educator at Hatch, I've never seen not one student, not saying that it didn't happen.
Right.
We didn't see it. One student, as the young people would say, black out on Mr. White. Why do you think that is so?
I hope it's because they saw that I had respect for them.
Mm-hmm.
You give respect and you get respect. Plus, I always believed that they could do more. So I believed in them. Mm-hmm. That was why we did the trips. That's why we had the all-male academy. Mm-hmm. That's why we had the overnight college tours. Mm-hmm. That's why you could come to my room every morning and get cereal. Mm-hmm. Breakfast. We served breakfast in the classroom. That's why if you needed school supplies, notebook, pencil, eraser, or anything like that, you could come to Mr. White's room and get your supplies and stuff. It was just that, I love the children, I respect the children, and hopefully they gave that back. Mm-hmm. So I hope that's the reason why.
Yes, and you saw it, that you talked about being genuine with the students, and they're not seeing it, because one thing children, like you talked about, children don't forget.
That's correct.
And they really don't forget, and they pay attention to the negative part. Yeah. And that's just people in general. Yeah. Because as we know, doing good is a natural part of the human experience. And when you do bad, you remember some of the bad things you had done. But if we try to tell people to remember some of the good things you did, you'll struggle with it, because that's the natural process of a person. So I think that it's important, because some of the teachers say that they have issues with discipline. Yeah. In the classroom, that they spend more time discipline instead of teaching it, so they can't even teach to the test, let alone making a whole child. And you talked about some interesting things that I think educators today, tomorrow, and yesterday need to pay attention to, about the respect that you gave as a teacher and the students gave back to you. Now, the status of education today, what you think about it?
This is where I might get in some trouble.
Well, we in Arts and Entertainment. Marvin Gaye, I am a trouble man.
All right.
I don't wear this for no reason.
I heard that. It is that test. It's that test. It's that test. Yeah. I feel if we taught children globally and worldly, different topics, and not just the narrow path. I look at my community at Cherry Hill, and now that I've kind of traveled the world since I retired, seeing cultures in other lands, at my age in the 60s, going to Europe for the first time 3 years ago, I'm seeing that I've even missed so much by just being in the United States and not being able to appreciate other parts of the world. So I honestly feel that when we keep that narrow focus, and I'm still talking about that test, where you have to get this, you have to get that, you have to get that, rather than on the individual child. We would have children coming in who maybe were on the 3rd or 4th grade reading level, in the 6th grade, if we were lucky. And if we could get them up that 1 grade or 1.5 grades, that was fantastic. But the test, from my understanding, is at this level. And if you're a 6th grader, you're supposed to get up to this level for the test. But if you're reading on that 3rd or 4th grade level, it's just kind of impossible to make that leap. And I think that puts a lot of stress, tension, and strain.
On both parties, the teacher and the student.
Because the teacher wants the student to do well.
Correct.
Wants them to achieve. But a teacher is also realistic.
Correct.
They know that only a small percentage is going to make that leap. So if we were able just to teach, and the child will naturally rise up and not take out the educational part that happens outside of the classroom, the trips, the outside exposures, which your child needs for all of that.
I think that's very important in a city like Camden, because you see education is a part of public safety. Education is a part of everything. It's the social movement and everything that you find out in Camden, what you feel and what you think about yourself. Just in picking up trash, that's education.
That's correct.
Yeah. And those wonderful things. I think that what you're saying is that it need to be heard by people, and I want you to speak candidly about what you think. Since you're not an educator, since you're retired.
Since I'm retired.
but I think it's great that people need to hear that, and we can add some balance to the conversation, because if people are not talking about it, because we as a community, as a people, as educators, if we can't teach to the fact that, or understand to people that, everybody don't think like us, everybody don't act like us, we can disagree, but yet how do we sit down and conversate about the disagreement? And that's one of the things that I try to convey in my person as an advisory board member, and talking to some of the people who come to the board meetings and angry. And if your child is not getting educated, the test scores definitely make everybody angry in our communities.
Right. Yeah.
The lack thereof in our communities, from within and from outside, can make people angry, but we still have a responsibility, civic responsibility, to talk to people, even when we disagree, and talk in a manner which that you want somebody to talk to you. I know that's how my parents raised me,
correct.
in manners. How good you think that is manners, good manners is to the educational process? Because I know Camden schools are doing something which I think is a great, called the PIBIS, or
I never heard of that.
well, it's a great thing. They're using it in their early childhood, many of their early childhood development program, but it deals with manners and good manners, and teach young people good manners. And how important you think that is?
Well, that's something that we've always done, at least in my classroom, the please and thank you.
Yes, sir.
Especially with the cereal in the morning, give the bowl and get the milk. They didn't say thank you. I was taking the bowl right back from them, like, oh, you don't need this because you don't appreciate this. Thank you is just a small thing, but it means a lot to me. So and it comes from where you were raised in your house also. I couldn't get anything when I was young without saying a please, a thank you, yes, sir, yes, ma'am.
Correct.
You did not address someone older than you by their first name.
Correct.
You know.
Sir.
So it just you had to have a title in front of it. I'm not sure if familiarity between parents and children nowadays are leading to that or what, but manners are extremely important, and it's something that we continually have to stress. Continually.
Well, the time is of such an essence, and it seems like I might have to get you back to go into some more striking things when I have such a man of your esteem here that got so much, 38 years of teaching and traveling around the world and into the arts and entertainment. And is there anything that you would like to say as we wind down, to give you an opportunity that you would like to say before we close out?
First, I want to thank you for this opportunity. Because this is like a first, for me. But
yes,
as you travel around, I encourage the parents, even if you take your child to, doesn't have to be that far, it could be to Baltimore or someplace, get them out, get them exposed to other cities, other areas, other parts of our country. If you can go out of the country, that's even beautiful too. But I'm learning that being exposed to other cultures is very important and can open up the mind.
Well, Mr. White, I can tell you that it's been an honor and a privilege, and when they say it's funny how time flies when you're having fun,
yeah.
And time flies too when you're really educating too as well. And maybe we can get you back. What you think?
That's okay, sure.
Yeah, Mr. White, thank you very much.
It's
always a pleasure.
Thank you.
I'm honored. Well, there we go as we wind down on this episode of the Wasim Muhammad Show. As always, I am greatly honored and privileged that I have the opportunity to broadcast to you through this wonderful station and give to you some great people from Camden and Camden County and the region in the Delaware Valley that have been doing some wonderful things here in our city. And as I always say, this is what this show is aimed to do, and what we aim to please is to enlighten you on the historical facts here in the city of Camden, to preserve our story and our history. Because if we don't do it, somebody else is going to do it for us, and we'll be sitting back throwing cabbage at the back of the room again. And we can no longer, in our community, as I always say, you hear me publicly say this all the time, we can't keep going around in our communities and looking at our communities the way that it is without we take full responsibility and want to do something from ourselves. What others want to do and should do, that's another topic and conversation. But if you're going to have the topic and conversation with Brother Minister Wasim Muhammad, I'm going to ask you what we can do. So I thank you and see you again.